Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome back to my channel. I do apologise for the break. I caught the plague that's been going around, the Christmas flu, and it absolutely floored me. I've never had flu before, and by I got it on Sunday it started. I went to work Monday and half a day Tuesday, which probably made me worse, and by Wednesday I just accepted that I was going to die because I've never been so ill in my life. It was awful. So I spent pretty much an entire week in bed and then going back to work last week, and I just couldn't bring myself to film because I just was not 100%. I was getting in from work and pretty much going straight to bed because I was just knackered. But I'm finally back to normal. I don't think I know anyone who it's not caught yet. Me and my best friend had it at the same time. We then just sent each other disgusting selfies of ourselves whilst we were in bed looking so incredibly rough, which was quite entertaining. As for consistency, I would have been consistent had I not caught the flu. I also want to mention that my New Year's Day video as well has been, flagged? What is it? Is it flagged? What is it, community guidelined? It's basically, they've put age restrictions on it, which I don't quite understand. I did try and appeal it and they said no. Which is fair enough. It's a very sensitive topic what I'm talking about, but isn't every video that I'm talking about a sensitive topic? I don't really understand it. So yeah, unfortunately my last video, I think you have to have an account and you have to be subscribed to me in order to watch it, otherwise you cannot watch it. So that's just an incentive to subscribe, so thanks. I've got a very interesting case for you today though. Me and my mum watched a video about it over Christmas, I think. And I'd never heard of shit like this before. And it posed a very interesting question. Can you kill someone in your sleep? And that is a question I'm going to ask you at the start of this video and at the end of this video. And I want you to let me know your opinion on it. Because personally, this case in particular, I don't think he was asleep. I'll explain my reasoning throughout, as always. And the case that I believe it's also based on, I don't think he was asleep either. I get that it could be possible, but it just seems a bit far-fetched for me. But let me know your opinion and let me know your arguments, because it's just weird. So today I'm going to be discussing the case of Scott Falter. I don't believe I have any trigger warnings for this case, but content warning, as always, strong language. Also, before I start, I'm doing another case that I did actually previously cover before it got really popular, annoyingly. I'm rewriting the script today because I wrote the script about 2 years ago and I don't know how I filmed a video on it. It just makes no sense whatsoever. But I will be coming out next week, I'm thinking, I don't know, I've got all of these here to still do. But I should be next week doing a case about Pamela Hupp. Or in the coming weeks. Pamela Hupp case is coming because there's just so much information on it. I don't know if I might have to split it into 2 parts and be one of those really irritating people, but I just genuinely don't think I'll be able to hold people's attention for the amount of information that I need to give you for the case. It's insane. And apparently there's one of those, what are they called? Mockumentary. That came out I think last year with Renee Zellweger in it, and she plays Pam, so I need to watch that and figure out what that's saying as well. You can tell I haven't been in front of a camera for a few weeks because I am just chatting. I've also had a few energy drinks today, so that'll be why. So Scott was born in 1955 to his parents Fred and Lois in Chicago. Scott and his soon-to-be wife Yarmila met whilst they were in high school. Yarmila was said to be a very happy and outgoing person, whereas Scott was described as nerdy and reserved. Prior to meeting Yarmila, Scott had never dated anyone previously, but it was said that he was immediately drawn to her, and he asked her on a date. She said yes, and from that moment on they were pretty much inseparable. In 1976, which was their senior year, they got married, which is incredibly young to get married and quite alarming. Yarmila eventually went on to pursue a career in medical technology, and Scott went on to an Institute of Technology university. I don't know what he was studying, but that was the university he was at. The couple then went on to start making a family. They had a baby girl, and 3 years later they had a baby boy. After having the children, Yarmila then eventually decided to give up her career and focus on raising the children. She was also incredibly active in her church, which was a Mormon church. They were both actually raised Catholic, but turned to Mormonism after, I think that's the right word, Mormonism, that sounds right. They turned to Mormonism after Scott had been inspired by hearing someone preaching, essentially. But both of them turning on their religion that they were brought up with upset both of their families quite a lot, especially Yarmila's, and she ended up having not really much to do with her family after this. The couple and their 2 children eventually moved from Chicago to Arizona. Scott ended up finding an engineering position at Motorola, and this was a great career opportunity for him and allowed them to live very comfortably as a family. Yarmila ended up getting a part-time job at a preschool, which she really enjoyed. She just loved being around kids. They sounded like they had the perfect little family life, and Yarmila found so much joy in being a mother and being around the preschool children as well. And she is just iconic for this, because this is absolutely me to a T. That she said, I can be spontaneous, I just have to plan for it. And if that's not me, I don't know what is. Friends of the couple said you would never meet a woman who cares for Scott like Yarmila did, and you'd never meet a husband who loved his wife like Scott did to Yarmila. They just seemed to have such a good relationship that was admired by both friends, family and their children. Just to prove kind of how much love and respect they had for each other, Yarmila actually went to like a couple's kind of party, and one of the games there was write down a list of things that like irritate you about your partner, which is a very weird game to play, and it just sounds like it's just going to ruin the night and piss you off, but whatever, not my party. But her list was empty. She had nothing bad to say about Scott. On the 16th of January 1997, they lived in a very upper class neighbourhood. There was not a lot of crime around there, and their neighbours Greg and his girlfriend Stephanie were outside, and they could hear kind of like muffled moaning coming from next door, and initially they thought that they could hear a couple having sex, so they kind of backed off a little bit, but then they did hear someone say, please don't. So Greg goes over to the fence to kind of like have a look over, see what's going on, see if someone does need help. And he says that he sees Yarmila laying on the ground. She's laying on her side with kind of her back to him. And she is moving. She does then move onto her back, and then she stops moving. Initially, he just assumed that she was drunk, like she'd just got way too merry and kind of passed out in the garden. And then he sees Scott coming out of the house. He sees one of the lights turn on and Scott come out the house. And as he's coming out the house, he's got one glove on and he's in the process of putting another glove on. He then goes over to Yarmila, stands over her, grabs her and drags her to the pool. And then once he gets her to the pool, he holds her head underwater and just holds her there and drowns her. All while the neighbour's watching. Greg then thankfully realises that this is not a husband trying to help his very incapacitated drunk wife, and goes and calls 911, which the call I will play for you now.
911, what is your emergency? I don't know. My neighbors, there was a bunch of yelling and screaming going on. I looked over the fence, and the husband just threw, I believe, the wife to the pool, and it looks like she's holding her underwater. All right, I'll get somebody out there. Thanks.
So officers and first responders go to the scene immediately. They go in through the back garden and they find Yarmila in the pool, and it's quite clear that she's no longer with us. She's not alive anymore, and Scott is nowhere to be seen. When officers then tried to get Yarmila out of the pool, the water started to change colour because she was bleeding a lot. And one of the officers actually described it being like kind of like a shark attack scene. He said, yeah, I haven't seen a shark attack, but this is what I imagine it looks like. So in addition to Yarmila being forcibly held underwater and drowned, she'd also been stabbed. She'd been stabbed 44 times. Most of the wounds were self-defense wounds, but quite a lot of them were fatal, and they were not little kind of like superficial marks. They were brutal stab marks, to the point the whole knife clearly went into her, to the handle. The whole thing went into her. One of these stab wounds was through her heart, one was through her spine. She had one in each breast, her neck and the backs of her hands. One of the officers saw Scott in the house through the window, so they made their way through like the sliding glass door into the house, and they're obviously shouting at Scott, like drop anything, get down, like they don't know what weapons he's got on him, what his mental state is or anything. And Scott's just shouting back and he looks really confused. He's in a plain white t-shirt, so he's in a fresh t-shirt, and he's just going, why are you here? What do you want? What's going on? One of the responding officers said that Scott's demeanour was strange. It was weird. It seemed staged. He was calm, confused, dazed, all of those things kind of mixed into one. Weird. And another one of the officers says that he was really out of breath, like he'd just been running around. If you can hear noises, I promise I'm not farting. It's my stomach and I don't know what's going on, but it is making a racket. I don't know how good this mic is. So they get Scott into handcuffs and arrest him, and they say to him, who else is in the house? And Scott says, there's three other people in the house. There's my wife and my 2 children, which obviously everyone's like, what the fuck do you mean your wife? Your wife's dead in the pool because you've just killed her. And unfortunately, Scott and Yamila's children were in the house at the time. Thankfully, they slept through everything and they didn't wake up halfway through to find anything or see anything horrendous. 12-year-old Michael and 15-year-old Megan, and they obviously went to sleep with both parents, everything completely fine, and then they've woke up to this. It's just awful. When Scott was eventually told that he had killed his wife, he immediately came back with, no, I was sleepwalking. I don't have any memory of that. I was sleepwalking. Where my first question is, how do you know you're sleepwalking? How do you know that you were sleepwalking? Because as far as I know, I've only sleptwalked once, but I had to be told that I'd sleptwalked. Is that the right tense? Because I didn't know. I'd gone downstairs and my mum met me and took me back to bed. I had no memory of it. But I didn't know I'd sleptwalk. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm trying to say? So Scott took us through his day that day, and he had gotten up really, really early. He'd woken up at like 3 o'clock in the morning because he had heard someone walking on. They had like gravel, and he went downstairs to check it. No one was there. So he went back up to bed, and then he was woken up by his alarm for 6:15 the next morning, like the same morning, sorry, because he was going to teach a class at the church because they were very, very active in their church, like I said. After this, he took his daughter to school, then went to work, came home, had some dinner, and then started planning his class for the next day. So nothing out of the ordinary, no arguments, no nothing like that. Around 9 p.m, the kids go to bed, and Yamila says to Scott, the pool filter's fucked. Can you fix it for us, please? So he goes to get his tools out and gets a knife and starts faffing about with the pool filter, but he can't fix it. So it's dark. He's just like, whatever, I'll do it tomorrow. He goes back in the house and Yamila's asleep on the sofa. So he wakes her up, says goodnight, and takes himself off to bed as well. He goes to bed between 9:30 and 10 p.m. And then he says the next thing he remembers is waking up to find everyone in his house downstairs. He said in the police station that he was just completely confused. Like, he didn't quite grasp that his wife had been murdered. He had no idea why everyone thought it was him that did it. And it's a pretty good theory to stick with. It's a pretty good lie. Like, it's not it gets worse because you can dive further into it, but it's not a bad defense, to be fair to him. I've heard a lot worse. It's not bad, and he does stick to it. I think he's still sticking to it now. He says to police, I understand that my wife's dead, but I just don't understand why everyone thinks I did it. And if the neighbour didn't see him do what he saw him doing, is that the right? I can't string a sentence together this evening. And that's what the officer says. He said, the neighbour saw you do it, hun. The neighbour saw you. You can't lie. He saw you do it. He keeps rolling with, he doesn't remember anything. He was sleepwalking, don't know what you're on about. And the officers just do not believe him at all. He actually called his story hogwash, which I love that word. Scott was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of his wife, Yamila. So Scott lawyers up. And I can't imagine the lawyer was too thrilled when he saw this case pop up on his desk, because I'd just be like, no. I wonder if they do that, like any lawyers who might be watching this. I wonder if they generally get like a case and they just think, how am I going to defend you? How am I going to defend you? Like, how do you separate the... Like, especially when it's quite obvious that they've done it, like, how can you possibly defend this person? It must be hard to kind of like separate your emotions from it. Sorry, went off on a little bit tangent then. The defence the lawyer thought of was that maybe he could do not guilty by reason of insanity, and said that he had kind of like a mental health blackout, and that's what had happened, and that's why he had no recollection. But the lawyer did learn from Scott's mum and sister that he did actually have a history of sleepwalking. He said that when he was younger, he'd get dressed and go downstairs like ready for school, like ready to go to school in like the middle of the night. And that when he was a teenager, he'd just start walking around the house starkers. And when they asked him about it in the morning, he had no recollection of doing that, which is probably a good thing. And it said that the thing that triggered him sleepwalking, which makes sense, is stress. So when he would sleepwalk when he was a teenager and a child, it was before he had tests. And the last time that they recall him sleepwalking is before his wedding, because he was stressed. So when he was 20 and he was planning his wedding, he was sleepwalking around the house, and his sister kind of went over to him. I think his sister's name was Laura. She kind of went over to him to kind of maybe guide him back to his room and make sure he was safe. And he literally picked her up and threw her across the room, which I don't think was in his normal kind of character. However, no one knew about this story. This was never mentioned to anyone. This wasn't mentioned to the mum. This wasn't mentioned to anyone. So it seems very convenient that it's kind of popping up now. Like, if my brother had thrown me across the room while he was sleepwalking, best believe my whole family would know about it. So it just seems very convenient that it's now come to light just when they're trying to build the sleepwalking defence. That might just be me being an arsehole though, I don't know. So the sleepwalking defence was apparently his sister's idea, because she'd seen a case recently on the news where sleepwalking was used as a defence, which is what I mentioned earlier, and that is wild. So I can't remember the bloke's name, but he killed his mother-in-law, who apparently he had a very good relationship with, but he drove 14 miles in his sleep. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. I don't buy that. Like, trying to drive when you're fully conscious can be hard enough, because people are just arseholes. I nearly got on a crash in where I live the other day because this bloke didn't indicate until he was 3/4 way around the roundabout, and I was already going. So I just fail to see how you can drive. I don't care what time of night it is, there'll still be cars on the road. How you can drive 14 miles while you're asleep. He got away with it though. He actually did get away with it. The defence was starting to make sense and was working in Scott's favour, because he was stressed, he was sleep deprived, he was stressed out with work, so they could kind of pinpoint that to why he had sleptwalked. But I think he did go to kind of like a hospital to get his like head wired up and be monitored for his sleep for a few days, but I don't know if they really found anything from that, anything compelling enough to use in court anyway. The lead investigator for the Sleep Forensics Association, who knew that was a thing, they stated that sleepwalking is kind of like an error in your brain. It can make you have very unusual and unpredictable behaviours. It said that less than 5% of people will experience this error, and even fewer of that percentage will become violent. And the key to becoming violent is your proximity to weapons, which makes a lot of sense. But again, I don't think this applies here, because he was asleep in his bedroom, and unless he's got a knife under his pillow, like, you're not that close to a knife. Like, if I sleptwalk now, like, my kitchen's as far away from me as possible. I am on top of my kitchen. I'd have to go all the way down, round and down again to get to my kitchen to get a knife. Like, it's just, I don't know the layout of the house, but he wasn't that close to a knife to make that plausible. I feel like I'm rambling a lot, but not making a massive amount of sense. Oh, that's good, isn't it? My New Year's resolution was to get better with scripts. And I wrote, the term for murdering someone while sleepwalking is, I don't know if you can see, it's just blank. I'm going to have to fucking Google that now. I know what the defence is called, parasomnia defence. I don't know. I don't know what the term is. Let me know if you find out what the term is. I can't find it, and I'm not sitting here all night looking for it. So the trial started, and it was massive. It was all over everywhere. You could not escape this trial. It was big, big news. The defence owned that Scott had killed his wife. They were in no denial, and they were not denying that Scott had killed his wife. But they were saying he did not do this consciously. So recently, Scott had been in charge of a big team at Motorola, and they were developing this chip, and the chip wasn't working. So he was basically there was a lot of people's jobs on the line if this chip didn't work. It wasn't just Scott, it was the whole department and the team that worked for him, and it was all on his head. So that's why he was stressed out. And obviously the night before the murder, he didn't sleep very well. So that is what they've kind of said has triggered the sleepwalking. 2 of Scott's cellmates, whilst he was in jail, prison, waiting trial, said that he was sleepwalking whilst he was in his cell. Which, how hard is it to fake sleepwalking? And if you're going to use it as a defence, you're going to want as much kind of evidence that you're a sleepwalker as possible. And if stress causes it and you're about to go on trial for your wife's murder, you're probably going to be a bit stressed. So I feel like I just don't buy it. I'm sorry. So the murder weapon and the clothes that Scott killed Yarmila in that were obviously covered in blood, he'd changed out of, and he'd actually gone out of his way to kind of hide the murder weapon and the clothes. So they were actually found in Yarmila's Volvo where the spare tyre is kept. But that, I believe, is where like the toolkit was. So he'd obviously gone for the toolkit earlier in the day to fix the pool filter, and he'd used a knife. So it is plausible in a sense. It is kind of plausible. Then also, it was said that he didn't use tools to fix the pool filter. He just used a knife. So fuck knows what he was doing in the Volvo. I don't really know. But in there was a little box, and he'd stuffed the murder weapon and his bloody clothes in it. But who knows if that was a conscious act or not, because at the same time, what is kind of the point of hiding everything? Because it's quite obvious you're not going to get away with it, but men, they think they know better. You can kind of really argue both sides for this case, because if the neighbour hadn't seen him and called the police, who knows kind of what would have happened. He might have put them in the car, like ready to dispose of them. He might have been planning to dispose of Yarmila's body and then just kind of panicked when all the police arrived because he wasn't expecting that. There could be so many different things that were going to happen that we would just never know about. The defence's story is that he got dressed, went out to go and try and fix the pool filter. Yarmila saw him go out and went to kind of wake him up, get him back in the house, and she startled him. He thought she was trying to attack him, so he attacked her. That was their story of what happened, or what they think happened. A lot of sleep experts obviously attended the trial, and whilst they did agree that it is probably possible to kill someone in your sleep, it was unusual just how many things Scott did whilst sleepwalking. Because he did a lot, okay? So he got up, got dressed, got the tools out of the car, he went to the pool, he tried to fix the pool, he stabbed his wife 67 times. So he didn't just stab her once or twice, he stabbed her 67 times, which I don't think, when I say how many times someone's been stabbed, I don't think it quite registers, and it definitely doesn't with me sometimes, just how much force, time and energy that was. 67 times is a lot. He changed his clothes, he hid his clothes, he hid the murder weapon, he put gloves on, and he drowned his wife. So what's that? 21? 15? I don't know. 11? Maybe it was 11. I don't know. And this was all within the space of about an hour. And typically, when people sleepwalk, they only do it for about 10 minutes. That pokes quite a big hole in this whole thing, because if generally people only sleepwalk for 10 minutes, surely, or maybe he was genuinely sleepwalking and then woke up halfway through. I just don't know. I really don't know. And I don't know this, but this is just kind of a thing that I think that surely you have to be in a relatively deep kind of sleep to sleepwalk, because Scott's neighbour rang the police at 20 past 10. Now, if he fell asleep between 9:30 and 10, he could have only been asleep for 20 minutes. Wait, not even that, because when did he start stabbing his wife? He weren't asleep for long. Prosecution, like I said, he did a lot when he was asleep. And prosecution made a list of 65 odd things that Scott did whilst he was asleep. And I'm just going to read you some of them because I'm not reading 65. If you really want to know all 65, you can Google it yourself. So first of all, he went to sleep with his contacts in, which I don't wear contacts, but I know people that do, and you just do not go to sleep with your contacts in. I fell asleep with Halloween contacts in before. I was blind for a day. It was horrible. He grabbed a flashlight whilst he was going out to fix the pool, which again is bizarre because if you're sleepwalking, you can't tell the difference between day and night, so you shouldn't need a flashlight. So during the attack as well, another thing that the neighbour witnessed was him shushing his dog. I think he shushed his dog and told him to go inside or lay down or whatever, but he shushed the dog, which if you can hear the dog barking, surely you can hear your wife screaming and moaning and saying stop. So we can hear that, but you can hear the dog, but you can't hear that. Like, that just don't make sense. So after stabbing Yarmila, obviously he had gloves on, or he put gloves on. Like, the glove thing was, again, odd. And then he put her in the pool. I need to uncross my legs, I'm so sorry. I am going to need a knee operation in the next 5 years. Yeah, so he puts Yarmila in the water. Now, you'd think, being asleep, your hand going into cold water would wake you up, but it didn't. Like, that's just not, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, no one could be asleep and have water on them and not wake. Surely, someone prove me wrong. He had also sustained some injuries whilst he was stabbing his wife, and he'd cut his hand, because most people do cut themselves when they've stabbed someone, especially that many times, because it gets slippy. And sorry, too much information. But yeah, he had cut himself, and he went and he bandaged himself up. He knew he'd cut himself and he fixed himself. He bandaged himself right up. Weird. And then he changed his clothes and he hid them. It's just, obviously there's 62 things on that list, and it is just a lot, and it just does seem very far-fetched to do all of that in such a long period of time, to be sleepwalking as well. And there's just a lot of things that just, I think, poke massive holes in it. Here we go, I've gone about, it was Kenneth Parks. Kenneth Parks was the gentleman who stabbed his mother-in-law to death, and that was 10 years prior. And it is thought that, what's his name? Scott. It is thought that Scott and his team were massively influenced by this case and thought, well, he got away with it, I can get away with it. What a good defence. Prosecution did also mention this as well, because that was a massive case, because he was acquitted of murder, which is crazy that you can drive for 14 miles, stab someone to death, say you were sleepwalking and get away with it. That's just nuts. One of the rumours that went around social media, because social media is generally toxic, was that Scott was actually seen reading a Kenneth Parks book about that case by his co-workers, but this was never brought up in court. It was never proved. This is just simply speculation. The one thing prosecution were struggling to come up with was a motive, because there just didn't seem to be one. And all of the testimonies from friends and family said what a good marriage they had, how happy they were together, and it just seemed really hard to kind of pinpoint exactly why he'd want his wife dead. However, they did try and paint that the couple were having problems, marital problems. Yarmila was questioning her faith, that Scott wanted more children, Yarmila wasn't interested in having any more children. They were having money problems, things like that, things that they can kind of just throw in there as a motive as to why Scott would want her dead. Scott did take the stand at his trial and just stuck to the fact that he had no memory of what had happened, and it was said that he couldn't actually even look at the pictures of Yarmila and what he'd done to her. The big thing that the defence kind of stuck to was that there was no motive, and there was not really any clear motive, and that was the big thing that they kind of tried to hammer home. But again, there's just, no one really knows kind of anyone's relationship massively. Like, no one really knows what's going on with anyone's relationship behind closed doors, despite what friends and family were testifying. So that's kind of what they kind of threw back at that. The neighbour did go on the stand as well, said that he didn't see the actual stabbing attack, thank God. I mean, what he saw was horrendous enough, and obviously said that he just saw Scott drag her to the pool and drown her. And then in the house, he was flicking on lights, he shushed the dog, he was faffing with glove. It took the jury around 8 hours over 2 days to come back with a verdict, and when they did, they found Scott guilty. He showed no emotion when this was read out, and I think it was 8-4 found him guilty. And I still stand by the fact that I think if the neighbour hadn't seen what he'd seen, he would have had more of a chance of getting away with it. So as for sentencing, Scott was up for the death penalty, and Yarmila's mother actually sent a letter to the judge pleading for his life to be spared for the sake of her grandchildren. She didn't want them to lose both parents, which is nice. Instead, the judge ruled for life in prison without the possibility of parole. So Scott is still there to this day, like I said, and he still stands by the fact that he was sleepwalking, and he has absolutely no recollection of what happened. But what do you think? Do you think it's possible to kill someone in your sleep? Do you think he's telling the truth? I think it's clear I don't. just because I think it's just a bit far-fetched that you could do that much. I do think that if the neighbour hadn't seen and called the police, it would have been very different, and Yarmila might have been missing because he would have had more time to do whatever he was going to do. But again, the one thing that is missing is motive. But like we say, we don't really know if they were having problems or not. I don't think they were, but you never know. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. I think I will be with Pamela Hub next week, or I'm going to do one of these ones that are here, because I've got quite a few. I have actually, I need to actually check if I did this one. Oh dear. So that's it from me. I will be back next week, because I do not intend on getting ill ever again, because I don't need it. I don't need that kind of negativity in my life, and that was just horrendous. I don't need it. Just write me off. If that's going to happen again, I'm done. I've had enough. So, make good choices. Oh, I need a positive thought. Okay, positive thought. This isn't really a positive thought, but this is just something that's happened recently. I don't know if anyone remembers The Tudors. It was on in 2007. Henry VIII's dishy. Henry Cavill, I think that's how you say it, is in it, and I didn't realise how dishy he is. So yeah, I'm just really enjoying The Tudors at the moment. It's really good. I do wish there was more strong-minded women in it, but I do understand that if you said anything back then, you'd lose your head. But yeah, me and my mum are watching that, so it's our little nighttime ritual at the moment, which is lovely. But yeah, I will be back next week. Make good choices. Check if someone's a sleepwalker before you get with them. If you are lying, just come clean. Because there's nothing. This is what annoys me about these things, because I'm like, if you are lying, there's no point in lying about it anymore, because you're already in prison for the rest of your life, so just give it up. You've got no possibility for parole, so just tell us what we all want to know. I think that's it. Don't get murdered. I'll see you next week. Love you, bye. Weird. Oh, please be mushroom bloom. Bollocks. My stomach is making some wild noises. Oh, Ski Ulrich is so fun. Oh, it's so nice to be back. What the hell does that say? You give her perk. No, start again. Finding an engineering. What? Scott's. Oh god, I'm so gassy. I need to click my back so bad. Yarmila. What?